We told everybody that the sort of coming out party for this number would be October 24th, 2009, so just about 2 years ago. And we didn't know how it would go. We just told everybody it was sort of like a potluck supper, you know. Just everybody do something. And we had no idea how it would work. We got the first sense that it was going to work 2 days early. We were sitting in our office, in a little borrowed office in New York, all around one table, 8 of us with our laptops open. And the phone rang, and it was a bad phone connection from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. There was a 17-year-old girl on the other end who we'd worked with in one of these training camps and who was organizing with her 18-year-old sister, Ethiopia. And she said the government took away our permit for Saturday. She was almost in tears. Ethiopia, not an especially nice government, but they took away our permit. We're doing it today before they can stop us. We're really sorry. We don't want to jump the gun. We were so looking forward to doing this with everybody else. And there are 10,000 people right now out in the street chanting 350. So I was like, Lily, don't worry about the date. It's okay, you know. And it was really interesting. The next, 3 days were some of the most moving days of my life. Before it was done, there were 5,100 of these demonstrations in 181 countries. CNN said it was the most widespread day of political action in the planet's history. I'll just flip through a few pictures, because what I really want you to see is who the people around the world are who are working on this, and who, if you're interested in working on this, who your brothers and sisters in this work are. And they are of all types. The second picture that we got, oddly enough, was from US troops in Afghanistan. They made a 350 with sandbags and sent us a note saying we're parking our Humvee for the weekend and walking, And after that, the pictures just flooded in. They kind of followed the sun around the world. But one of the most interesting things for me was recognizing early on as we watched that one of these things I'd been told about my whole life, that environmentalism was something that rich white people did, and that if you had to worry about where your next meal was coming from, you wouldn't be an environmentalist and that kind of stuff. That just turns out to be complete and utter nonsense. Most of the people that we work with around the world are poor and black and brown and Asian and young, okay? Because that's what most of the world is made up of. And because those are the people, they care as much about the future as anybody else. I got to say the truth, rich white people are about the hardest group of people to get really interested, because they're the ones who are benefiting the most from the ways that we're doing things at the moment. So it was really, pictures were coming from places I'd never heard of, places I had. There's Calcutta. There were 300 huge demonstrations across India. Places we couldn't identify, someplace in Buddhist Asia, very poor places. These guys were dugout canoes on the Congo River, someplace above Kinshasa. They'd lacked a digital camera. They developed it in a home darkroom. It didn't come out so well, so they had to write in what their banner had said. But there, that's where Conrad kind of identified the heart of darkness, and there they were, completely engaged and enmeshed, and the pictures just appeared from every corner. The Muslim world was particularly involved, it must be said, all around the world. And beautiful things, and that's from the Space Needle and the colors of the Venezuelan flag, and hopefully they didn't stop for too long, just, really beautiful stuff going on almost everywhere. For me, one of the nicest things was deep involvement of religious leaders, really for the first time in this kind of thing. There's the head of Muslim South Africa, of kind of indigenous traditions in South Africa. Behind them in the scarlet is Archbishop Tutu's successor as Anglican Archbishop at the head of a huge multi-faith march across Cape Town, Pentecostal school in Ghana. There's Whittier College, the most important evangelical liberal arts college in the country, Billy Graham's alma mater. I'd been to Bethlehem to do organizing, not an easy place really to get to, but the Dead Sea is shrinking with great speed as the temperature warms, so people were very eager to do stuff. Because there are too many military barriers and things in the way, the Jordanians said, we'll make the 3 on our beach. The Palestinians said, we'll do the 5 in Palestine, and the Israelis said, we'll do the 0 over where we are, You guys in Quivira are used to kind of crossing boundaries and, you know, interest groups and stuff, this is a kind of extreme example of that, a very moving one. And there were lots and lots of the, you know, iconic locations everywhere, since it was an autumn Saturday in the US. Of course, we were at a lot of football stadiums. There's the Syracuse cheerleaders helping us out in front of 100,000 people, but just coming in from every corner around the world, these really powerful images, super powerful. 300 big demonstrations across China. Not an easy place to do this kind of stuff. One got broken up by the police, but most went off. That's the China Youth Climate Network making a human wind turbine, and behind them you can just see the edge of the largest wind farm on Earth. People of every kind. The Maldives, one of our favorite places in the world. Absolute paradise. 1,200 islands strung across the equator, the Indian Ocean. Been there for 5,000 years, continuous culture. Only problem is the highest point in the archipelago is about 1.5 meters above sea level. Chances are they will not make it through this century, but they're trying hard. They're determined to be the first carbon neutral nation on Earth, and they're building windmills as fast as they can. And they're really politically involved too. That's the Student Government Association holding their meeting in the lagoon. The President Mohammed Nasheed of this entirely Muslim nation trained his whole cabinet how to scuba dive, so they could hold an underwater cabinet meeting against their dying coral reef and pass a resolution to send to the UN about this 350 stuff. That's good leadership. One of the reasons it was so powerful was because people didn't look the way that other people thought they would, you know? Didn't look like environmentalists. So all those women in that zero are in full black burqa. They're in Yemen, in one of the tougher places in the world. They don't look like Sierra Club members, but their, you know, essential stance was the same. We want a working future, you know, and we understand the peril that we're in. Oil-rich sheikhs in Abu Dhabi, smarter than our oil-rich sheikhs, many of them. They're investing a lot of their money in renewable energy. The UN just moved its big renewable energy lab to Abu Dhabi. If you look behind these guys, you can see the edge of the largest solar array on the planet, all right? And there were, you know, 500 or 600 pictures that ended up in a file that just was called 350 Adorable. And they really were adorable, and they really were sad, too. Those girls probably be refugees by mid-century, and thanks to, you know, us in large part. So I wish I could tell you all this completely carried the day. It helped. We got to that big Copenhagen climate summit 6 weeks later, and we convinced 117 nations to sign on to this 350 target, which we thought was pretty good for 18 months' work with 7 college kids. But of course, they were the wrong 117 nations. They were all the poorest and most vulnerable ones, and the big rich addicts, led by us, weren't yet ready to hit bottom and engage in any way. And so that thing just fizzled. I thought it might take down this whole movement, but people were made of sterner stuff than me, and we've had the last 2 falls even larger big days of action. We just finished one a few weeks ago that was sort of, we called it Moving Planet, and it focused on sustainable transportation, and there were bicycles all over the place. They operated in every country on Earth except North Korea. This is all incredibly important, and we need your help, and people in New Mexico have been a great help. I was up in Santa Fe last night with some of the people who've done the most to make it happen. But it's also not enough, and we're also going to need to be more willing to do what needs doing. And I'll just finish with my 4 minutes left to tell you about the work we've been doing this summer and fall about this Keystone pipeline that would run from the tar sands of Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico. The reason that we're worried about it is because those tar sands are the 2nd biggest pool of carbon on Earth. If you could torch them off all tonight, which thank God you can't, but if you could, it would raise there's enough carbon there that you would raise the atmospheric concentration of CO2 from its current 393 parts per million to 540 parts per million, okay? So if it wouldn't be, you know, then hell here, it would be of a similar temperature, all right? And so we can't let it happen, but of course it was wired to happen. because the oil industry wanted it to happen, and they usually get done what they want. In order to try and break that cycle a little bit, 1,253 people went and got arrested in very civil disobedience outside the White House in August and early September. It was the biggest civil disobedience action in 35 years. People some of us went to jail for a few days, and it was the kind of ante we paid to get into this game, and now we're fighting it just as hard as we can fight. And there's at least, I mean, the odds are still against us, but there's at least some chance that we'll win a real delay, perhaps a delay enough to kill this pipeline. And we've certainly concentrated public attention for the first time on the peril that these tar sands present to the entire planet. It's a peril shared with many other new forms of emerging extreme energy. All this fracking for new type gas and oil, mountaintop removal, coal mining, ultra deep sea oil drilling, all the kind of things you do when you're running out of the easy kind of oil and gas, and when you're not yet willing to sober up and fly right, you know. We should be taking the fact that we're running out of easy oil and gas as the clearest clue that it's time to move on and make the transition that people know in their hearts we need to make. But instead of that, we're thinking up excuses and finding new sources of energy, hydrocarbons, and there's enough there to make sure that the planet warms past any tolerable point. We're going to have to, the planet's not going to do it for us, we're going to have to figure out how to exercise self-restraint. And that's what this fight is about. And it's the most important fight that human beings have ever engaged in. And it's not at all clear how it's going to come out. If you were betting at the moment, you'd have to bet that we were going to lose, because we've been losing steadily for 20 years. But the reason I show you these pictures is just to tell you that there are lots and lots and lots of people who are taking up this fight. And many of them, to my mind, with extreme generosity. I think if I lived in Bangladesh, where people have done absolutely nothing to cause this change, but where they're already seeing their farms disappear as the Bay of Bengal rises, and where people are dying by the score as dengue fever spreads, as mosquitoes spread, things like that. I think if I lived there, I might, and somebody from the West appeared and said, help us in this fight against, I think I might just say, thanks, but no thanks, you've done enough already, get the heck out of here. There are people who are willing to engage in this struggle together, and I think that that kind of demands that those of us in this part of the world engage in it too, that we respond to that willingness with the kind of willingness of our own, even when it means making changes that aren't easy and voting for things that might cost us money, and so on and so forth. This is not going to be an easy change to make. Getting off fossil fuel will be about the hardest thing that people have ever done. But the alternative is far harder still. I'll just end by saying something I said the other night. Don't for a minute think that people who advocate for action about climate change are somehow radicals. There's nothing radical about trying to keep the world in something like the same shape you found it when you were born. What's radical is to be willing for money to change the chemical composition of the atmosphere. That's as radical an idea as you could possibly come up with. Exxon is a hotbed of radicals, and their work, the results of it, can be seen all around us now in every cubic meter of air. And so it's going to be a really, really, really interesting fight. Like I say, I don't know how it's going to come out, but I do know that there are lots of people who are going to be fighting it as hard as they can. It's always an honor to be in those rooms. It's an honor to be here this morning, because I know that an awful lot of you are deeply engaged in this kind of work, and I look forward to working with you as time goes on. Thank you all very much.